You're listening to Nurture Your Zest. I'm your host, Ashleigh King, and I will introduce you to a wealth of interesting, fascinating individuals from all walks of life who will share their stories, how they've overcome challenges, and you will find out their top tips for success. Through this podcast, you can gain tips to grow and change your life and the way you see the world, and help you to nurture your zest. Hello everybody and welcome to Nurture Your Zest. My name is Ashleigh King and I am host of this podcast, which normally records in a professional studio in Newcastle upon Tyne. Because of the coronavirus and the lockdown, I have been recording episodes online and then sharing them on YouTube and in my usual podcast ways. So it's been really great to learn how to do some new skills. And I'm so thrilled that you're here with us tonight, watching what we're doing and chatting to guests. So tonight, I'm delighted to be joined by Steve Pugh. So Steve is an entrepreneurial leader. He is a chartered mechanical engineer, and he helps businesses solve problems. He uses creative thinking, and he's a really inspiring person to talk to. So I can't wait to chat to him tonight and to introduce him to you. But I'm also just excited just to chat to another person at the moment, because I've been feeling really stuck and lost a bit with this lockdown. So delighted to have someone to chat to. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Steve to the conversation.
Hi,
Steve. Hi.
How are you doing? How's life?
Well, I have to be honest, I'm finding this lockdown incredibly hard. I feel like the longer that we're locked down, the more scared I am of going outside. I don't know if you know what I mean by that.
But if I'm brutally honest, the last time I was out the house, apart from to take the bins out this morning, was probably about 3-4 days ago. And it's not that I'm scared to go outside. It's just I find it really funny at the moment. But I do have a very exciting trip to Tesco planned for later this evening when it's quiet. So yes, I empathise with everything that you're kind of going through.
I also have a trip to Tesco planned, so I'm glad it's not just me. And I also try to keep them quite far apart, just so I go as infrequently as possible.
Yes.
So I'd love to introduce you to everyone, and to do that, can you just tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name's Steve. I was born and raised in Liverpool. My mom raised me, and actually, I don't know if we'll talk about it later, but almost I think when you're raised by a strong female role model, I think that actually sculpted me in different ways. That actually, it's only in hindsight in later life do you really appreciate that, and I think that's part of the reason why I kind of have the values I do, which is really an interesting one. Went to uni in Sheffield, did mechanical engineering. Graduated before it was 2007, then went to work overseas in Jamaica. It was on big $100 million kind of chemical refinery expansions as a project engineer. Global recession hit in 2008. The world went to kind of pot, which was, it is what it is. I then went back to Sheffield for two reasons. One was to do a PhD, and the other one was to win a girl back, who's now my wife, Lisa. She's downstairs. And it was the kind of thing that the only reason I went back was to win a girl back, and that was the sole kind of reason, so I don't really hide that. At the time, I'd gone from working overseas on big construction projects from that to a scholarship of £13,300, which, is not bad, but it's not the best. So I started my first business at the same time. And what I was looking to do was innovate in the kind of photography space, doing a lot of university black tie balls events, that kind of thing. And basically what I then went on to do was learn my craft and how to launch, grow, sell a product, sell stuff, go out, do it. Anyway, fast forward a few years, moved up to the northeast of England to kind of get married, get a job. Started working for regional government for 3 years, which is called LEP on Teesside. Whilst there, I was looking after all the offshore energy companies. Sorry if this is long, I'm just trying to give context. So I got to really kind of embed a lot in offshore energy companies to really understand what issues they face, what they need to grow, and really the kind of challenges and stuff that they have. Based on the back of that, I ended up inventing a £10 million financial fund, which was the first of its kind in the world to help companies bid on big contracts. So that's called the Tees Valley Catalyst Fund, which has unlocked about £200 million worth of work since it's been running. I used to travel around the world to sell England as a place to invest for offshore wind. That was on behalf of the UK government. Then after that, I was poached back to the private sector, went into sales and strategy, worked for various different jobs, was made redundant in 2014 in the oil price crash. Luckily landed the managing director job at a company in Shildon, which at 33 was a great kind of life ambition, but it was using the lessons I kind of learned. Then since then, I've worked for PLC energy firms, etc., all about strategy, growth. And I started on my own back in October, November last year.
Wow, what a whirlwind. So we've been on a whistle-stop tour of your career and also your personal life. And it's so fascinating to me because, we meet people at networking events or online or on LinkedIn who, they're a picture on your screen and you don't really know that much about them. You might collaborate with them in some way, but actually to get to hear your journey like that has been really fascinating. I didn't know, for example, that you were raised by your mom in Liverpool. I always knew you had an interesting accent, but I wasn't sure actually how to place it, which makes sense given your work in Jamaica, studying in Sheffield, working in the northeast of England. So uh, I wouldn't have said previously that you had a Scouser accent or anything like that.
But the context on that was actually that so when I was probably about 15, 16 in the UK, you do something called GCSEs. And as I was starting to go through my career and look at university for my career, it was actually one of my uncles who was from the same part of the world, but had done very well in construction. I remember he said to me once that rightly or wrongly, people would judge you based on your accent. So when I ended up going to uni, I was suddenly in a completely different environment with a lot of different people from different backgrounds. And it was that I felt both out of place because in many ways I was probably the poorest member of my friends at uni. So it was a real kind of culture shock that it was a big learning curve with people that I hadn't met before. So I both socially wanted to fit in, but actually I had the kind of career aspirations. But then fast forward kind of 10 or so years, once I'd kind of got various kind of chips off my shoulder as I'd kind of gone through, I've kind of relaxed a bit now because one of the things that I've found, which is almost a lesson for anyone, I guess, from the north of England or anywhere, is that actually the ability to both speak to the C-suite, CEO kind of level, but also still resonate and be able to talk to what I class as normal people is arguably the biggest skill I've actually got. So actually now I'm a lot more relaxed in my accent because actually it's actually a superpower or a skill that I can deploy that actually if I was very highly privately educated and I had no accent, I would struggle to do that. So actually it was more when something that was originally a chip on my shoulder, almost learning to embrace it in many ways. But yes, that's why I have a strange accent that both it used to be very strong, then it disappeared completely, and then I've kind of relaxed into it recently. And I also talk a lot, if you haven't noticed.
I think that's why we get on so well. But yes, I think that's really important context and so helpful and valuable. And actually, one of the things I like to do on this show is to talk to people about, has there ever been a time where you felt on the outside or, perhaps like nobody understands you or something like that? And you've already alluded to some of that. Going back to that time at university or other times in your life, did you ever feel that coming from a different background to others or judged, or how have you dealt with that in your life? How have you had the resilience and the courage to kind of cope with that?
Well, I think we're going to go very deep very quickly. So I apologize to everyone, and especially Suki that seems to watch every single one of your shows.
She does.
Hi, Suki. I think it's a funny one that it's only in hindsight do you learn from it. So it was the little things. So for instance, when I went to uni, you meet people from all different backgrounds who I'm still friends with. We all had very similar morals, I guess, which was, kind of in different groups of friends with different people. But it was little things. So for instance, we'd go to lectures. So mechanical engineering was generally 9 till 5 most days, except Wednesdays for sport. But we'd go out for lunch, and there was various kind of cafes and stuff we'd go to, and I was always conscious of the lunch was going to be £3.20, or they wanted to go to Witherspoons, which now it's not that I laugh at it, but at the time it was a serious. I was worried about paying for stuff, and it was almost when you have that at the back of your I don't know, have you ever seen the film Good Will Hunting?
Yes.
So obviously that really kind of resonated with me because, you know, one of the themes of the film is almost how he's not ashamed of his background, but it's there. So obviously, you know, it's something that plays out kind of during the film, but it was one of the things that kind of resonated with me in some ways because, you know, anyone just wants to kind of fit in. So when you're in a different crowd, you in essence do anything you can to kind of fit in. But that was probably the biggest one for me, where it was such a steep learning curve that actually, I think in some ways, ironically, having a chip on your shoulder, whatever that kind of is, actually is one of my driving forces. That actually, again, now looking back, I wouldn't change it, but it wasn't necessarily kind of fun to go through, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that because I recall a similar thing being at uni myself. You know, especially Freshers Week, I found it especially hard because the amount of money that they had planned and the different circumstances that everybody had. I know that I often skipped classes because I had to go and work. You know, I had to work shifts to pay my tuition, whereas other people were having everything paid by mom and dad and given, you know, £150 a week, spending money. And I would worry about, as you said, you know, the £3 plate of chips or whatever it might be in a restaurant. I think one of the worst things when you're in that space and you're too scared to say it is when people want to split the bill and
Yeah,
you think,
yeah,
oh
yeah, yeah.
my word.
But it's something that as you go through your career, is that ironically now that I get paid more than I did, or I earn more than I did when I was at uni, but you keep the same value set. So when we both joked about going to Tesco's later, you know, I still look for the bargains. I still want a good deal. That yes, there's, you know, I occasionally buy kind of nice things, but it was almost I think it's a good mindset to have. And actually, when you then come to apply that to business, and one of the chats that we have, it's almost the part of the reason why I have a broad skill set is because I know how important it is to minimize costs and any kind of spend. And it was a chat we had kind of before we came on air. But actually, it's the same mindset that kind of sets me up, that allows me to create more profitable businesses. So I still believe that that kind of background has helped me longer term, even though, yes, it's actually, nobody's ever asked me about it before. So very good question, Ashleigh.
I'm glad to hear it because I like to ask the weird and deep questions, I guess. I do want to ask a little bit as well about what was it like for you? So, you know, going into university, perhaps one of the, you know, less affluent members of your friendship circle, and then, you know, really succeeding in your industry, getting directors, you know, roles at a very young age. So to go from, you know, that kind of what am I doing here to earning a lot of money. How did you find the change and how did you cope with that?
So there's two sides to it, and one is very personal, which I'll talk about, but the other one is it's quite funny. So for instance, when I moved up to the northeast of England, I was working for the public sector. I was on a, a low to moderate public sector wage, and people probably guess what that is. And actually, I was more than content. I really enjoyed it because for me, the passion and the fulfillment comes from the creative and the stuff, as opposed to actually buying things. But then actually, as I got promoted, so I got headhunted to be head of business development for an oil and gas kind of company, group business development manager. I got a £20,000 pay rise when I got that job. And basically, I never actually spent any more money than went between the two jobs. And then as I've kind of gone through my career, I don't spend, actually, I probably spend less money now than I did when I was on 28 grand a year. But actually, it's because that doesn't necessarily, buying stuff doesn't make me happy. Does that make sense? So actually, I have a very dull social life that generally involves creating stuff on YouTube or whatever, because actually that's where I find my kind of fulfillment, as opposed to, you know, Mulberry handbags or Rolex watches or whatever. So yeah.
I think there's something to be said for being content with what you have and, you know, spending less anyway. I think a lot of people who haven't quite broken through that money shift of, you know, needing to prove themselves
But don't get me wrong,
actually struggle.
I also, it took me a long time to get there. And actually, what was quite funny for me was that, this is very deep now, and nobody knows this, but I'm going to share it anyway. Was that when I grew up, it's not that we grew up poor, but we kind of did. And actually, there was points at school when I was bullied because I had really cheap kind of school shoes and stuff like that. And basically, when I finally had made it, if that makes sense, and I was doing quite well, I did buy a nice car. And actually, it was something that I'd always wanted, because when I was, what was it, probably like 12, they used to have something called the UK Motor Show, and you go and you'd see nice cars, you see Porsches and Ferraris and stuff. And actually, when I was there at the time, it was the year they launched the Porsche Boxster, and at the time, I thought I'd never be able to get one. And actually, fast forward to when I was 33, I achieved two of my life goals. One was to become managing director, and the other one was to buy a brand new Porsche. And I bought a Porsche Cayman. And what was quite funny was that it was a massive fulfillment for me personally, just because it was a dream that I never ever thought I'd achieve. But actually, when I was talking it through with one of my friends, I later realized about 6 months after I had it, and I still sold it at a profit, which was great. But actually, it was my way of almost telling the world that I wasn't poor anymore. Does that make sense? And there was two sides to it. One was just a completely personal thing. It was something I wanted to have and cherish. But there was almost a part of me from the child that was bullied at school for not having, kickers' shoes used to be a thing. And it was just, but you only learn this in time. But once I'd kind of gone through that journey, I then escaped some of the pressures that I was putting on myself to prove myself, to almost be the person that I wanted to be growing up. And I know we've gone very deep here, but it's the kind of the true answer. But actually, once you've kind of gone through that journey, this is the reason why I'm content now, not spending any money. And it's just because I get my fulfillment in books and knowledge and learning and like the whole mentoring thing. So I know we speak sometimes, and there's some other people that it's the values and stuff through that kind of thing, which actually kind of, I enjoy. But I'm happy that I discovered that probably at 34, 35 and not at 55 or never.
I really love that. And I know, as you say, we have talked about this before, where I think we both probably feel we are ahead of where we wanted to be. So that sense of when you are 40, 50, the way you want to give back and mentor and lead, and everyone has a vision for their lives, but I do know that we have both met certain goals earlier than we hoped, and I really love that. I also want to comment on something else that I think is really important. So, something I'm curious about, Steve, is a lot of the time in entrepreneurial circles or spaces, I see people, and I've been guilty of this myself when I first started out, just taking any piece of work they can to pay the bills. Often for people we don't want to work with, work we don't want to do, it doesn't light us up, it doesn't give us any passion, but just anything and everything we can do to keep us afloat. And something I really respect about you is that you don't do that. So I'd love to hear what your approach is, but I also want to make a comment on something that I've observed, and I may be wrong here, but I think you do something that I do, which is to watch and observe people before you engage with them.
Yeah.
So could you comment on that?
The engage one or the other one?
Well, both. Yeah, it would be great to hear your thoughts.
Okay, I forgot the first one, so I'll do the engage one if that's okay.
Yeah.
So it's a funny one that with everyone has a set amount of time in their life. We have the same number of hours in the day as Einstein or Newton or anyone, and it's that kind of thing where because of that you only have a certain amount of time to do stuff, and it has to be as valuable as possible. And then actually, the more you get busy, the less time you have, which is a separate chat we've again had. So almost you need to be very selective when you run your own business about who and where actually adds value. And almost you will have people that well-intentioned will want to pick your brains on a lot of stuff. But you also have to learn to say no and almost avoid those people before it happens. Because if you spend 2 hours helping someone, or even an hour to travel into the coffee shop, an hour with them or two, then travel back, so that's 4 hours. But that's arguably like an eighth or a tenth of your kind of working week that you could have spent driving revenue, making phone calls, doing sales. And I think you have to be selective just to be successful. And then almost spinning off that, there's a lot of things where I think the level of people that you also interact with and their ambition and what they've achieved, a lot of kind of business books talk about this. But actually, I don't like the phrase being around successful people. But where I'm going to phrase it is almost from a solopreneur point of view, the more you're around people that can afford to buy your product or service, the better your revenue and sales generation and the higher value your customers you'll get, which again means that you can be more selective over the jobs that you take, as opposed to being in a smaller pond with smaller fish where you have to eat more fish to stay alive, if that makes sense. And then just from the inspirational point, because again, most people use that kind of topic to talk about getting business inspiration, is where I get mine from books as opposed to physical mentors. But that's why I'm quite selective on time.
Yes, I love that. And I love the metaphors because I'm always about metaphors anytime I can. Um, so the first question that I made you forget was actually about being selective with people, and the second one was about being selective with um, your energy and things like that. So what about with people? So you watch people and you engage with them before you get involved. So you don't necessarily mentor and help everybody. It's the people that you want to. But how do you? I'd like to hear a bit about how you choose the work you want to do, so you can free your time to work on the things that really light you up.
Okay, so there's two distinctions. One is that when you first start out, like first properly start out, and you just have to earn enough money to pay your bills, I wouldn't necessarily turn down anything. But what you do need to do is find things that are high enough in value that is worth your time. Does that make sense? And then also within your kind of skill set, there'll be certain tasks that you can do which might demand £700 a day, and other tasks within your skill set that might be £400 a day. And you need to learn to focus on the 700s, not the 400s. And almost, but you learn your niche and learn what you're good at. And that's almost how you prioritize the task. And it's an iterative process to constantly learn about where your value lies, where your USP lies. And then actually within your branding and marketing and materials, continually reinforce that, if that makes sense. And then related to kind of the watching people angle, I do watch a lot, both what experts do and different people in the industry. And if there's something that I think I can try and tackle better than other people, so live streaming is a prime example I've been trying to learn recently, I'll throw myself into it, because from a business point of view, it's a genuine USP and a competitive advantage that I have that other people don't have. And that's where I do look at what other people's strengths are, their weaknesses. And then on the mentoring kind of point of view, it's when I go to events and I'll kind of talk to people. I think almost sometimes you just get a vibe on people that you like or you don't like, or they might say one particular thing and you kind of just resonate and I want to help them. But likewise, if I get the vibe that someone just doesn't like me, or they're not out to help other people, I do purposely kind of avoid them.
I think that's an important point because often we need to trust evidence and facts, when we're making decisions. But a lot of us also use our instinct to make decisions. And I'm wanting to know, how important has instinct been to you? So you're an engineer. Engineers are notorious for being so good with processes and systems and problems and all that kind of thinking. Yet you are also very creative. So how much do you use instinct and intuition?
I would say on your average decision, 80%. So I've a good feel for, I can tell if something's going to work or not. And that's almost a sign of any good engineer, that if you're making a bridge or anything, you'll kind of roughly know what will work and what won't. And actually, I think some of that almost comes from scouts and growing up, where you'd make a lot of stuff, be it a rope bridge out of, I guess, ropes and wood or whatever. But you get used to how far you can push things and just physically making stuff and realistically if it'll work. So now I often don't actually look at much data. It's my gut feel. So it's almost where on a business economics kind of strategy point of view, I try and have a lot of touch points. So I watch a lot of, short clips on Bloomberg and what the US economy is doing and whatever. But I use them all as different data points to almost have a map in my head of how to process the whole, as opposed to sit in depth and read detail. Does that make sense? But that almost comes with experience.
I love what you're saying there, but I also want to pick up on something else. So I know that separately you're going to feature on my MBA with Ash, a new podcast, which is a completely different focus, and different people will be listening to that. But something I do want to pick up on is the type of content that you're accessing to check evidence and to check things like that, because I think it's very easy to access low level and low quality information and then spread that around and share that with your community. And I think that can be a challenge and a risk of entrepreneurship, in that anybody can start at any point. But I do like that you're accessing, Bloomberg data and perhaps Forbes and, Financial Times information, and making your decisions at a much higher level. I think that's really important, because what you are then giving to your clients is a much more well-rounded view, actually.
But I think the view comes from, ironically, and it's part of the reason why I wanted to give the backstory, because I've always learned quickly, which is what I'm good at, but I pick things up, but because I've had lots of different jobs, I've been able to learn things about how the public sector works, how that whole machine, which it is, kind of works. Different industries, from small SMEs to PLCs to the stock market, to lots of different things at different points in my kind of career. And then once you kind of understand and you've seen behind the veil and you kind of understand it, it takes a long time. Arguably, that is your 10,000 hours to kind of get up to speed to understand how business or stuff works, marketing, sales, promotion. But then actually, once you have that, it could be just one gem that you say in a conversation, or I pick up from someone, and actually it just changes my viewpoint. Does that make sense? So it's almost just, it's lots of different touch points. But that came from, because I'm 36 now, 37 in June, so I'm getting old. I've got grey hair. But actually, it's that, I guess, oh God, 14 years or so since uni, of all the different industries going through oil price crashes and 2008 recessions, and starting my own business and failing and doing lots of stuff, that you learn to fail fast. So in some ways, I've almost treated my career like a lean startup, where you just do lots of beta testing, where you go out and do stuff and then you do more stuff. And that's where I kind of get my information, which I might flavor and change over time. But actually, once you've kind of got the solid grounding, you don't actually need a huge amount of information to steer the ship. Does that make sense?
I love that. Yes, I love it. I'm also a big fan of fast failure. I like to just go and do, and sometimes I get it right, sometimes I don't. But I think
Sorry,
failure
just on
is,
that point, though, I think that was almost one of the reasons why I first reached out to you. We've spoken about the past, but for me, because I've had to learn to always do stuff with next to nothing and almost kind of fight my own corner, I know how difficult it is to do stuff. And I think when I'd seen you as the girl that wears red at all these kind of networking events, but actually I saw that you did your podcast and you did lots of different things. I resonated with that. So I completely agree on your point that actually it's when someone is confident enough to try something. So say Suki again, if she's still watching, she put on her event recently. She had to go out of her comfort zone to actually create something, stand on a stage and kind of put herself out there. And that really kind of pulls at my heartstrings, because I appreciate that and that effort. And that's where we kind of resonated, because I saw you doing it. The truth is 90, probably 8% of the population will never ever do that. So people that do, and do it in a way that I like their moral intent and what they're trying to do, that's what makes me gravitate towards people. So that's kind of, yeah. But I just wanted to congratulate you for actually being one of those people, because that's part of the reason why I reached out, as opposed to maybe the other 100 people that are at the same networking events.
Thank you. It's nice to hear that. I always find it curious what people like or see, how the kind of information that's reflected back to you. I think it's always important to hear the information that people are sharing. I know last December I went to TED Women in California, and I shared some videos online on LinkedIn about being there, and they were just really fun things. But it was fun to see what people said.
One of the things I've been thinking about more is, and it's a sign of success, but it's very difficult to deal with, is that when you first start out, you have everyone likes your posts. They celebrate you. Aren't you fantastic? You're going out on your own, you're doing whatever. And then actually, it's a sign of success when people stop liking your stuff. So, for instance, if Usain Bolt goes into a race and he comes fifth in the Olympics, people would probably badmouth him and say, "Oh, what's he doing?" Whatever. But my point is that when you actually start to get somewhere, people then see it as normal, and actually your likes and stuff on your post seem to drop off, which actually can be quite emotionally difficult to deal with, because you're like, what am I doing wrong? But actually it's because you've leveled up in business that actually it's now normal. Does that make sense? And it's one of the things that, because I'm only 6 months into starting, I guess, my second business 10 years later after my first, but so I'm only 6 months in, but I've felt it as well. But actually I embrace it because it shows I'm doing something right. But it's interesting.
I think it's a really important point. I've noticed this because I launched my podcast quite quickly and now I'm helping other people with theirs. And one of the things I've found is, when I launched my podcast, I didn't know who would listen, but I worked really hard on my target listener and who I wanted to listen and how I wanted to help them. And it's really taken me by surprise because somebody contacted me recently to say they've been listening since I started last September, but they've actually quit their job in the financial sector and gone and opened up a coffee shack, which is great because actually the people I want to reach are those who are stuck in an office sitting behind a desk who hate their lives, and they're looking for something that is more in tune with who they are and what they're looking for. So that really shocked me, and I noticed that that had quite a strong impact on me. But at the
Mhm.
same time, another thing I want to comment on is if you're doing business right, you're not targeting your family and friends. So whatever you might be putting out there, it might not get all the likes and all the love and all the support because actually that's not your target audience. And I think if you are just targeting the people you know or your family and friends, you're never going to be successful because you need to think bigger than that.
Completely agree. It's so my target market is arguably, well, it's business owners who, especially in the Northeast, probably 50-year-old white men is probably my main kind of target. And those people don't really do social media. They're very conscious about what they like and don't like. They hate over kind of self-promotion. But there's different nuances to different audiences almost, where on that kind of token. So I do kind of business consultancy. I help companies grow and I'm very good at it. But a lot of the people that also do what I do are probably white men 50 plus. So I have to differentiate myself as a business as against those guys. So my take is different, and I interview people now. I do live stream and I do lots of different stuff because that's a way for me to differentiate and hit a different audience versus what my competition does. But you are completely correct that I I constantly look at who my target market is, and the only thing that actually I judge myself on is how sold out I am, how much revenue I can bring in. And that seems to be going well, even if only two people kind of like my posts. And then again, on the kind of podcast point of view, every time I interview someone, and I do about two a week, but I'm going to knock it back to one a week. I haven't even pushed it yet onto iTunes or anything because I'm doing it to learn it. I actually don't care if anyone likes it or not. And I think that's almost, for me, I've now moved past. Everyone has a point where you want people to like your stuff, but actually, it's almost, people shouldn't judge themselves on metrics which don't matter. And so I completely agree with your kind of point.
Absolutely. We talk about vanity metrics for a reason. They are vanity metrics, but they can be helpful to know how many people are looking and watching and that sort of thing. But yes,
On
the value metrics are really important.
on the looking point of view, again, it's an important one. So often my target market, which is kind of people I spoke about, they will see my stuff, they'll see that I'm active, and they'll hopefully still absorb the message, but they don't interact with it, they don't like it, but they're still seeing it. So part of the reason why I still continue to put things out is that I'm still achieving my goal. Does that make sense? So it's almost for the audience, don't always give up if nobody's liking your stuff. You might actually still be getting great reach, even if people aren't obviously liking it as much as you'd like them to.
That's a really important point and something I'd like to ask you. So your target audience probably has some links to mine. So some of the people that I'm having in my podcasting group now are saying, they're very much uh, a lot of them males in their 50s who want to talk about something but are very scared to be visible. Now, for you, you are being visible, you're showing up consistently all the time, and that's what brings new clients and customers because you're staying front of mind, and people know to trust you, and it builds rapport, it builds, expert level credibility. So all of this is really helpful. But I'm just curious, for those people who are scared to be visible, how do you reach them?
It's a funny one because so how do the people who are scared, how do you encourage them to make the first step? Is that the question?
Well, I think they'll engage with your content, and through perhaps several months after considering you, they'll make a connection with you. They might make an inquiry on your website, send you a LinkedIn message.
Mhm.
But in a sense, what you're providing them, I guess, is helping them with their visibility for them. Is that
Yep.
right?
Yeah, yeah. And so what I find funny is that again, if you link it back to sales, is that all of the social media is marketing and branding. So it's getting yourself out there and getting known for what you can offer, and you gradually, hopefully, build trust over time. And then it's only at a certain point when you either make an explicit ask to go out to say to someone, can we have a chat? I believe I can help you with this, that they can then respond to that. Or, for instance, what happened with me is that arguably for 10 years I've been building my brand because I started social media video probably, 10 years ago. Is that once I then launched on my own, people I actually hadn't seen or spoken to in probably 3-4 years got in touch and they wanted to hire me. But if I wouldn't have kept up the momentum on my stuff, I would have fallen off the radar, and that wouldn't have ever happened. And that's happened a few times again when I was a management consultant for an offshore energy business, and I'd made the leap from being MD to go and doing that kind of thing. And there was a chap that I hadn't spoken to in about 8 years. And he rang me up and said, look, we're looking to grow the company. We want to interview for different potential CEOs. Would you be interested? But it was only through social media and interaction that over time, hopefully I'd learned to kind of communicate my visions, my values, what I like to do, my approach to things, that again, in the back of people's minds, hopefully builds a picture that they like, which that's what you can use to drive a business or things in the future. But it's very rarely an instant kind of win.
Absolutely. And I love what you're saying there about people seeing what you're doing and coming back to you at whatever time it might be. And it's so nice to hear who you help, who are the people that you work with. And I'm also interested in that perhaps a lot of those people in your target audience don't have the same values you do. At least it strikes me that way, that you are targeting people who are slightly different to your own value structure and system. And I really love that. I think it's very brave.
It's when you can demonstrate the value, so you know what their pain points are, but actually that's where you can make the biggest change. Sorry, because one of the things actually I noticed was that a lot of businesses may have more than one director, and actually in some cases that you purposely have people who have different viewpoints and personalities that actually together complement them. So you normally have someone that's a bit more maverick. Generally, the CEO would be the dynamic, go out, sell it, pitch, that kind of thing. And then it could be generally the financial kind of background. Can be more of the kind of hold back, sense check, whatever. But together they make a great team. So in that kind of scenario, you have a lot of people who might be business owners that are shy. They know that their company isn't promoting themselves very well. So a piece that you can add into that puzzle is someone that isn't afraid to go out, promote themselves, promote the company. They're very well networked. And so it's almost, you can then use that as a strength for why people should hire you, because it's a skill that you have that other people don't. So you can use it to your kind of advantage.
Could you share with me? I've seen some companies actually hiring people to go out and network for them,
Mhm.
almost like I guess a business development manager or lead generation person. Can you explain a bit why CEOs or organizations might hire someone to do that? It's always puzzled me.
Okay, so that'll be based on the point in the business growth cycle. So all businesses pretty much start with the founder, and you get to a point where you go out, do your own sales, do your own delivery, do your own stuff. Then at a certain point, you build the machine. And then it depends on both the needs and wants of the owner stroke CEO, that they might be too busy with stuff they see as more important. A lot of people don't enjoy it. A lot of people will do it, but they only want to actually kind of network with their social peers, which is a big thing that everyone wants to kind of the recognition of, seeing their friends because they actually enjoy that bit. But the actual grind to drive a proper sales engine, which is business development falls part of, it's not necessarily a nice job, because you have to, I think I've spoken about it in the past, but my own kind of sales pipeline is to target 1,000 people. And that is something that a CEO does not want to do. So a business development person is out there to build relationships, find out what's going on in the market, do a lot of the legwork, that they will still bring in the expertise from the senior management at the right time to do pricing or commercial decisions. But it's almost that person forms part of the sales cog to run a bigger business. So the bigger the business, arguably the bigger the machine and sales engine you need to create. So that's what that is.
I love that. It's really helpful actually to hear your explanation there, because I think that's a real added value for many businesses who, as you say, CEOs, they want to spend time with their peers, but often there is a lot of time wasted. So to have somebody to filter those people and filter opportunities is really powerful. But at the same time, I do want to mention, I know we were at a Northeast Times event, both of us recently, before the lockdown. And I know that my partner Paul was there, and he observed this very strange thing where somebody went up to somebody, it was a very senior director of a law firm, and just started babbling about themselves and completely took over the conversation, introduced themselves, and almost disregarded this person, not knowing who they were and how important they could be to what they do. So I do think it's important how we interact when we network as well.
That's just inexperience, to be honest. That it's we've probably all done it, because it's, for me, business development is about having your product or service as an option which is considered at the table when the company is ready. So that you might sell. So there's a classic kind of figure that at any one time, only 3% of your buyers are ready to buy, which means at that particular time, so today, 97%, they might be ready at some point in 6 months and 2 years, but it might not be today. So the idea is to be able to have awareness with as much of your target market as you can and build a relationship there, so that when they're ready to make a decision, they can choose to speak to you or not. Often when people get too transactional with sales, the chance that they're going to hit someone who's ready at the 3% at that one particular time is rare. They would have to be desperate to want to make the purchase straight away, because again, most business relationships are exactly that. It's a longer term kind of thing, that if someone comes up and starts barking at you, when you said before about how you kind of avoid people or choose to kind of swerve them, that's one prime example that people, you don't get blacklisted, but you soon start to ignore the people that don't add value. And that's almost where we both got quite a long time left in our careers, that you have to be successful, approach the game, and I do see it as a game in the right way, that actually it's the long-term approach. Because what will often happen is that people will like, Ashleigh, I like what you do, I know you do podcasts, but they will want to know, okay, I like this person, what can I buy from you? How does it work? How much does it cost? And it's when you need to build the trust and the relationship first, and then get to that second. And it's a mistake a lot of people make.
But also another mistake that a lot of people make, I think, is not talking about the sale. And we've spoken about this before, not sharing how people can buy you or work with you, or actually making the ask is a really big thing that a lot of us leave out. And I think that is what differentiates the successful from the non-successful.
Because you asked me once, because I have my prices on my website, and I think kind of if you asked why did I have it, or that it's brave to do it, but when I discussed it through with my wife, it was almost the, if you go into a jewelry store and you like a watch, if you might look at the watch and say, okay, that's £4,000, it's expensive, but I'll buy it. If there's no price tag there, you'll probably walk on. And it's that same thing I sometimes do at restaurants. I prefer that people know the price, but then demonstrate the what they get and the value that comes with it, as opposed to not state that and never have people get in touch. Because you'll also have same people who actually think that that is good value. So when you said earlier on about how do you focus on the higher value clients to drive your business, that's exactly how, because actually there might be 5 potential customers that wouldn't blink at £4,000 for the watch, compared to 90 others that were like, I wouldn't pay more than 40 quid for a watch. And it's just trying to find your niche. But unless you kind of put your flag in the sand, it's very hard to find your audience, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. But it is also about owning that space and saying, this is my price. This is what, if you want my time, this is what you need to pay. And I think that's really powerful. And it's certainly something that I'm hoping to get towards myself, being very clear on what it is you offer and how you can help. And being really focused on that. I've never really been very focused in the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey, but I'm starting to see the value of that, because you can only help people really if you have a clear direction and path.
I think so. And because one of the big things, if you ever look at high value technical selling, so there's a book called Spin Selling by Neil Rackham, which is, it's about 300 pages, but actually the crux of it is listen, help understand people's problems, help develop the problem in their head. And then once you've done that and you've really kind of weighed up the balance between the real problem and the implications if it's not fixed, and then your solution, you then seem really good value. So the big one for me is that people might think that my day rate, or some people might think the day rate is quite expensive, but if I can double the valuation of their business to exit for an extra £2 million in 2 years' time, that's where the value selling comes in. But that almost just comes with experience that I wouldn't have known, 6 years ago. So.
Excellent. I always like to ask, is there a book you'd recommend? And you've just said one. I know you've also written your own book. So how did you find the author process? Did you enjoy it?
No. Okay, I'll give you the true story, which might be interesting. So, for instance, so I was MD of the company in Shildon, and again, I was 33. I was learning my craft, and I've always been good at learning things. But actually, throughout all the different stages of my career, whenever I've had a really good piece of advice, I'd write it down. And one of the things that I realized was that they'd started to add up, and I was doing my homework, and I was reading a lot of books, and I was basically starting to write it out. And I purposely wanted to give it away for free to help other people coming through their career, to basically save them the 8 to 10 years it took me to get to that point. But because I lived and breathed it every day, and I still do, almost it's a brand credibility piece to actually, I've won work off the back of both having meetings with customers, talking to them, but then actually the fact, like I've got a call with a venture capital firm tomorrow, but actually that when you can have the conversation, but then also demonstrate the knowledge by sharing stuff that you've created, it's the extra decision piece that it's something in my arsenal that not everyone kind of has, which is why I kind of did it, even though I don't make money from it at the moment. But actually the process to go through it was painful. It was long. It was a lot longer than I thought it'd be. And actually I messed up some stuff as I was going through the process. But actually I don't regret it. And it's almost now the foundation for my business. But it was long and painful and whatever. But actually, now that I've done it, I live and breathe it every day. And I'm really proud of it, to be honest.
Lovely. I really love hearing that. And I think it's important to know, that it wasn't the easiest journey doing that, but also it's nice to have something that, all of that learning that you did over those series of years, you can actually put into something. It has an output and you have that credibility piece, which is great.
But
So
just to jump in, is almost that, because ironically I've always rolled my sleeves up. I don't know if you can see my sleeve, but just throughout my career, I'm very hands-on. But that's the big thing, is that I will read a book. So it could be on sales management, marketing, whatever. But I then apply my own twist to it based on what I think will work in the real world. And that's one of the big things that I always spotted, was that you have, so say Simon Sinek is a brilliant writer, brilliant books, great stuff. But he writes for a global audience, and most of his customers are big PLCs. So they talk about organizational change and stuff, which is a lot of really big stuff. But almost from my background, that isn't always 100% relevant to a proper Northeast SME. So one of the things I was always conscious to do was take the high level concepts, but then distill it and put the flavor on it, which is relevant to my audience, which is Northeast of England or North of England businesses. And I think it's that nuance to actually take information from world-renowned speakers, discard the bits that you don't appreciate or don't think are as relevant for your audience, but then bring it together. Does that make sense? So you have to I never take anything just verbatim. Sorry, I do talk a lot. I'm very sorry.
Please don't apologize, especially not on this show. It was going to be the Chatterbox Club, but it's Nurture Your Zest. So I love chatters, so it's wonderful. It makes my job easier. I am conscious of the time though, so I would love to just ask you my favorite question, please, which is, what is your number one word to nurture your zest?
Okay, so this is based on both personal experience and actually I think it fits in very well. So the start of last year, I wasn't having the best time with work. I wasn't particularly happy. And I went and spoke back to some of my friends that I've known for 20 years. We were talking it through, and he is a philosophy lecturer. So again, he goes very deep, very fast. And he asked me, was I flourishing in my job? And I realized that throughout my career, I was learning different stuff and I felt like I was flourishing. And then in a former employer, it was the opposite. I felt like I was wilting. I was very unhappy. I had no energy. I wasn't in a good kind of place. And actually, after I made the decision to set up on my own and kind of launch my own thing and actually just be creative and be fun and be happy again, basically flourish is my word.
I love that. We haven't had anybody say flourish yet. And
I know. I went and checked your website to look at all the words. And we also had guests who've done more than one word as well, which I think is cheating.
I agree. They did not stick to the rules, and it's me for being a bad rule master. But also, I like flourish because it reminds me of my favorite metaphor, which is sometimes a flower just needs to move to another windowsill, which I think is really important. And what you're saying there, you know, sometimes we do wilt wherever we are in our lives, and actually taking the decision and the courage to change what you're doing and, you know, try something new is really powerful. So I also think it's great to have friends and people around you who can give you that kind of feedback and advice. And
it's so the guy in question, his name is Josh, and we used to play on the Sheffield basketball team together. But one of the things that I actually quite value, and actually the same true with my wife, so it's going back to 2002, which God's 19 years, is that he knew me when I was the awkward, poor kid at uni. My point is that they've got all the context that actually sometimes you need that to kind of either pat you on the back or kick you down or tell you your ego's getting too big or whatever. But actually it's when people know the full, nobody knows the full story. Your parents might, but actually you're completely correct that you need good people around you that don't just pat you on the back all the time, but actually, people that you can call if you're ever in trouble or you just want some advice or whatever. So completely agree.
Well, thank you very much. I love that. I've so enjoyed listening to the context of the life of Steve. That's been really powerful for me. I love learning about people, and I think sometimes you can't get all of that at a networking event because there's just so much going on, so much noise. So it was really delightful to hear all of the amazing things you've been through, and I'm thrilled at your word, which is flourish. I can't wait to put that on the website, actually. So thank you so much for being a guest tonight.
No problem, thank you. And very good questions as well. There's certain things that I've never been asked by anyone, and you asked me and I told you. So no, thank you.
I have been given that feedback before. I like to think it's my USP, but we'll see. Thank you very much, Steve. I'm going to remove you from the stream now. So bye. So thank you everybody for tuning in tonight to Nurture Your Zest. It has been wonderful to talk to you. We will next be live on Thursday this week, which is, I believe, the 7th of May. So if you'd like to find some inspiration, please do join us. And I hope you have a wonderful evening and stay safe.
You've been listening to Nurture Your Zest. You can find us online on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and LinkedIn at Nurture Your Zest. If you've liked today, please subscribe. You can also leave us a review if you're feeling extra kind. Today's podcast has been made available through the kind sponsorship of TL Multimedia and That Branding Company. We look forward to catching up with you again soon as you learn to nurture your zest.